and thank you for joining us today for our Color Me STEM event. I would also like to extend a special warm welcome to all our Girls Who Code attendees. This panel group discussion is dedicated to each and every one of you. My name is Marcia Custodio, National Sales Director at Akkodis, and I am extremely excited to be your host and moderator for the next hour. We have with us today an exceptional group of women who will be sharing their unique and authentic journeys in the world of STEM. Before we get started, I would like to welcome a very special guest, Akkodis' very own Mike Small. Mike, the
Thank
mic
you
is all
so much,
yours.
Marcia. It is a pleasure to be here. My name is Mike Small. I'm the president of Akkodis North America. At Akkodis, we're a global powerhouse in IT and engineering, talent, consulting, solutions. We help engineer a smarter future together with our candidates, our consultants, and our clients. We want to ensure that we're not only more innovative, but we're also more inclusive, more sustainable, and more diverse. I take my role at Akkodis as a male ally very seriously. We want to ensure a culture of inclusion, and we want to make sure everyone has a feeling and a sense of belonging. That's why we're here today. Women make up nearly half the US workforce, but sadly, only 27% of the sciences, technology, and engineering math workforce. This is something that has to change. At Akkodis, we strive to make STEM accessible for everyone. Together, we need to work on creating pathways for women to pursue STEM careers. We also need to foster this earlier in students' academics careers. That's why recently we've launched our strategic partnership with Girls Who Code, an international nonprofit organization that we work very closely with to help close the gender gap in engineering, software development, and technology disciplines. As a partner supporting this initiative, it's not enough for us to only foster passion for computer sciences among girls and young women. We know it's our responsibility to build pathways to ensure we're given equal access to the opportunities that are going to be lucrative and exciting careers. We're quite passionate about talent and technology, and you will see this come through in the panel we have put together for you today. Marcia is one of our most passionate leaders in the group, and I know that the team and the panel that is going to come together will be exciting, exhilarating. So let's get right to it. Marcia, back to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Mike. Completely appreciate your opening remarks. Your passion for attainable action and meaningful change is indispensable. Your support and continued advocacy is not only critical, but a shining example for all. Thank you. I want to begin by sharing how thrilled I am about the diversity currently represented on this panel, not just in race and ethnicity, but also in industry and career stage. A true see it to be it event where the ultimate goal is to inspire, educate, and demonstrate via representation. We will spend the remaining hour visiting with each one with the intention for everyone to walk away informed and empowered. So please feel free to enter your questions in the comment section. If we can't answer during our time together, we will certainly follow up post-event. So, on to our esteemed panelists. First up, Olga Custodio. Olga is a Latina military and commercial airline aviation pioneer with over 40 years in aviation as the first Latina to complete U.S. Air Force undergraduate pilot training and the first American Airlines Latina commercial airline pilot. She served in the U.S. Air Force for 24 years and retired as a lieutenant colonel and flew 20 years for American Airlines, retiring as a captain. Now a STEM advocate, speaker, and community leader, she works as a board member with several nonprofit organizations that advocate for inspiring and empowering students, especially those from underserved communities, to pursue careers in aviation and aerospace. She lives in San Antonio, Texas, Military City, USA, with her husband, Edwin, of 48 years, has 2 adult children, Marcia, that's me. This is my mom, so this is a very milestone event for us. I've never been on a panel with her, much less moderating it, so historical moment nonetheless. as well as my brother Edwin is also one of her other children, and one grandson, which is my son Jedi. So welcome, Olga, aka Mom. Thank you for being here. Next up, Alexandria Butler. Alexandria, aka Lexi B, is a self proclaimed freedom fighter and leader in building executive leadership and workplace equity in the tech industry. After several years working at some of the biggest tech companies in Silicon Valley, Butler founded Sister Circle Black Women in Tech, initially as a way to meet another Black woman in tech to be mentored, as they make up less than 3% of the tech workforce. Today, this community has over 14,000 members in a global online community sharing their insights, challenges, tips, and opportunities. Sister Circle, Black Women in Tech, launched a new and instantly popular job board in 2022, attracting the eyeballs of thousands of Black women with tech skills seeking career opportunities in a bustling economy. Welcome, Lexi B. Thank you for being here. Next up, Morgan Covell. Morgan is a staffing industry veteran with a passion for HR technology and the role it can play in creating a more equitable world of work. After starting her career as a recruiter with no technical background, Morgan pivoted to the field of technology about 5 years ago, currently serving as the head of technology innovation for Adecco Staffing in the US. Morgan works at the intersection of business and tech to help bring digital transformation to this traditionally manual industry. Born and raised in St. Petersburg, Florida, Morgan currently lives in San Francisco, California, where she can feed her obsession with technology innovation at the expense of her love for all things college football. Yay. Welcome, Morgan. Thank you.
Thanks. Excited to be here.
Me too. I think a couple of ladies are on mute. Olga and Lexi B. So,
well, hello.
First,
Yes. Hi. So, I was just waiting for you to finish.
No, thank you. Thank you. So first up, Olga, you were recently recognized by the Hispanic Heritage Foundation as an honoree in STEM advocacy. First of all, credible honor. Congratulations again. Can't say it enough. Can you share how you've been promoting STEM and the programs you currently support?
Absolutely. And it's such an honor to be here today. Thank you. That STEM award was a huge honor. I'm still letting it sink in, and it was so memorable, not just for me, but for my whole family who was with me. But as my daughter, I am very passionate about STEM. I'm a huge advocate as well as a community leader and a professional speaker. I've had the privilege of and the opportunity of speaking to universities, technical schools, aerospace and aviation conferences, government agencies, corporations, and so many more. And I'm so happy that I've had that opportunity to go out there and inspire the younger generation that's coming up behind us. But I do my best to share the need to do more outreach to the underserved communities. There's so much potential there that we are losing, and we need to help them. But I think one of the biggest challenges for many of them is the access to money. So I'm involved with fundraising as well as giving out scholarships with those fundraisers that we do. And I want to share that this past August, and one of the nonprofits that I work with as a board director and also a trustee of their foundation, we awarded over $120,000 in scholarships. So it was a huge year for us, and we continue to do so, and looking forward to so many more. But as a board member of the other nonprofits that I work with, I'm part of promoting and offering programs to several local school districts, as well as coordinating events to expose those students to STEM careers. I wanted to be a math major, get a math major, but unfortunately that wasn't the case. So I'm trying to help young students understand how important math is. They all fail what am I going to use this for? But um, I just really, really am glad that that passion for math helped me promote my career and be successful in it. But I try and show them that no matter what their passion is, they can still be in aerospace and aviation. So we need all kinds of people, engineers and avionics, IT, all of that is required in aviation. So if they love aviation, they can also do what they love in other fields. But I think getting them interested into the programs has been successful to this point because we've really involved the district leadership, the counselors, and the teachers because they're the ones that are going to kind of promote that passion to the kids. But where I've seen a challenge and the lack of support is in keeping them in the program and finding great mentors for them. I think mentorship is key. But once they're established in their careers, we feel we really need to help them navigate through those challenges, especially women in non-traditional jobs. But I do my best to stay relevant, visible, and especially accessible as a role model and a mentor.
Thank you. Yeah, no, there's data out there that shows that the sharpest decline in girls, right, is that age between 13 and 17 when it comes to tracking towards STEM careers. So to your point, right, exposing them, encouraging them, mentoring them as early as possible in their schooling and really being an example and a representation to show them, you know, because sometimes they don't know what they don't know. They don't know what opportunities are out there, right? They don't know, you know, that that there's also opportunities within aviation at the airport, right? You know, in the towers, right? And sometimes people haven't even been to the airport, much less, you know, been on a vacation. So I know that you've done round, you know, field trips to the airport, exposing them to those different career tracks, which is mind blowing for them, right? Just that one experience can change the course of, you know, even if it impacts one student, you know, your impact. From the first moment we met, obviously it was quite apparent that you exude a passion for not only life, but also retaining and supporting Black women in tech. I would love the audience to learn about Sister Circle Black Women in Tech, how it came to be, where it is now, and what your plans for the group are in the future.
Yes. Before I get started, I just wanted to honor the fact that I'm in this phenomenal room with all women of color doing fantastic things. And I think that we should just take a moment and honor that because many times, even though we can do the job, we are not in the room. And so I find this very sacred and very divine and very, very special. So yeah, I've been in tech my whole career. And to be transparent, I never wanted to get into tech. I was that kid at 13 who was like, this math ain't gonna work. Right. I am an operations person, know thyself, know it well. Growing up, I knew that I was a great executioner. And so if you give me a task, I can just go into a forest of creativity and make it fantastic. Right. So my experience joining tech was very much as a fresh new college grad, 3.5 weeks after graduation, somehow managed to trip myself into a tech company to start doing some operational work within engineering. I quickly realized that not only was I the only Black person, I was the only woman. And what does that mean to be the only Black woman in a room? Right? I remember on my first day of work, the first person I met after I went through security was a white man who told me that my shoes are very, very high for someone who's going to clean toilets. And that was my first time meeting
Wow.
a leader at a tech company. So imagine having that experience. So Sister Circle Black Women in Tech was an opportunity for me after I've been in tech for a few years and really understanding my job and learning how to do my job. I was caught in a place where I was in rooms with a lot of leadership. And my job was to make leaders accountable of things that we needed to do, which is very hard as a dark skin, 5'2", usually curly hair everywhere woman. Because I was like, how do I tell these white people what to do? without them having a reaction to my physical presence saying that. And so I decided to not start an organization, but just put a back call signal out to say, hey, any other Black women who want to have brunch that can maybe help me and figure out how I'm going to do this, how I'm going to navigate it. Because I was in a part of my career where I was slowly moving up in the ranks. And I realized if I don't figure out how to do that, I'm not going to go as far as I want to go and as far as I deserve to go. Right. And so those simple brunch conversations is now 5 years later, a 14,000 plus organization of Black women supporting each other in the tech space or trying to get into the tech space. I think there's a lot of wonderful people who are doing work to discuss how do we get Black and brown folks into tech. And I love that work. I support that work. My job in Sister Circle, what we're really talking about is how you actually thrive once you get here. Because there's a lot of campaigns, there's a lot of money involved to get Black and brown bodies into these tech spaces, but people then don't want to have a conversation about how you actually succeed in these spaces. And so Sister Circle Black Women in Tech, I always say, is the underground railroad for Black women to succeed in corporate spaces where you can actually come and have authentic conversations about how you're feeling and have a lot of people around you not only mentor you, but also sponsor you in that feeling, in that growth, and most importantly, remind you of your purpose. And that purpose is something that you define. And the real question is, once you define that purpose, how do we use this corporate space for you to get to that end goal? Because that's actually your liberation.
100%. I agree with you. Everybody talks about how do we hire more diversity, but how do we then retain that talent internally and give them the tools and the knowledge to navigate in circles where they're going to be that only one. Right. And oftentimes, because there is such a disparity in understanding, that's why the whole concept of reverse mentoring, which I completely support, because sometimes it's not just about receiving mentorship from someone that's been there. Sometimes reverse mentoring to tell that other person how they're living and experiencing that world helps to educate that individual as well to be better leaders.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So thank you for the work that you're doing. And thank you for the comments. Morgan, hi.
Hi.
So you've experienced what many would consider as a non-traditional pathway into STEM, which I feel is incredibly impactful to share with our audience. So please do, I know we talked a little bit earlier, as far as how you got into the role that you're in now. If you could share that trajectory with the audience, I think it'd be very meaningful to show that, technology is everywhere, right? Technology, every company is a technology company now. So you can have careers directly in, it doesn't matter if you're actually coding with your own hands. You can be selling technology. You can be using that technology. There's technology adjacent careers, right? So would love for you to share how you got to where you're at now.
Yeah, I love what Olga was saying about making sure that young girls are informed about what their options are. Because I had no idea what was going to be out there in the world, and trying to make a decision at 18 about what you're going to do for the rest of your life is so difficult. And so I ended up with probably the least technical degree you could possibly get. I have a major in English literature with a minor in classical studies. There was not a single math class to be taken to get that degree, or a science class. I think I took astronomy as my science lab in college. But when I got out of school, I still had no idea what I wanted to do. I knew that there were a lot of things I liked. There was a lot of things I was interested in, but none of it had presented itself as a clear career path. And so I ended up in recruiting because it was an entry-level job out of college that didn't require a lot of previous experience. And it was a great opportunity to really kind of get into what was a very large industry that I didn't know anything about before college. My vision of staffing companies was still somebody like going into an office and getting handed a card with a job they would go do that day from TV and movies.
Me too.
And, right, nothing. I had no idea. So it was a really great learning experience. But after about 2 years of doing the position of a recruiter, I realized I didn't have any drive or passion for it. But I was really fascinated by the industry itself and how much room there was to change and grow within the industry. And so I started just looking for other opportunities within the company. I didn't want to leave, but I knew that I needed to try something else. And I think that's another thing that's really difficult. And I think hits on some of what Lexi was saying, which is once you get somewhere, trying to figure out what your path is from that entry level position is really difficult. There's not a lot of, even in companies that try to make sure that they do it well, there's still not a lot of structure around, here are your career path opportunities. It can be very narrow once you're into a specific role, especially if that role is viewed as sort of a support role. It's very hard to get out of being in a support career path. And so that was kind of what I did for a while. I went from recruiting to doing proposals and presentations, but really still behind the scenes supporting the people who are in the front line. And then I got really lucky with an incredible mentor. And I love, Lexi, you said sponsor, because I think that there's a big difference. I would argue she was more of a sponsor for me than a mentor. Somebody who would, really put my career first, said my name in rooms, made sure that I was brought in on things when I could be. And it was a chance into technology. So they were looking at starting to investigate where can we find HR tech vendors that we could partner with to improve our business. And this incredible woman was starting up this group within the company that was going to do that. And she gave me an opportunity with her, and I took it and kind of ran with it from there. I was terrified because I had no technical background, and I spent probably the first 3 months writing down every other word that somebody said and Googling it when I got home, because who the hell knows what blockchain is? But it really was an incredible learning experience. And it's how I ended up where I am now, in technology innovation for Adecco. And I think that all of those mixed experiences feed into where you end up. Like if you're not in technology now, if you have years of experience in something else, don't feel like you have to throw that away to pivot, because that diversity of experience makes such a difference in your ability to do that next job. Half the time what I'm doing is just really translating what the developers have to say to what the business users can understand. And that I attribute a lot back to my communications degree. And so I think there's always an opportunity to change and to pivot, and you really never give up with what you've done before, and never think that what you've done is a waste just because you didn't learn about an opportunity until later in your life.
100%. I think giving ourselves the grace and giving people permission to know that you don't always have to have it all figured out, right? Life is a curious way of taking you through some windy roads to lead you to where you're at now. I had a similar start, Morgan, we're fresh out of college with a marketing degree. I got into recruitment. I was like, you don't go to college to be a recruiter, right? So when you land in that role, you're like, well, this is different, right? But look where it's led me now, right? So take chances, be curious, be resourceful, Google is your friend, right? And you're not supposed to know everything all at once, right? So that's the beauty of life. So thank you for sharing that. So on to some more questions here. So being a minority in any setting, both professionally and socially, has its fair share of challenges. Olga, what were yours, and how would you say that you've overcome them? If you can share some examples.
Absolutely. Well, when I started in my profession, there were 0.01% of females in that profession. I mean, so to talk about being a pioneer and a trailblazer, I really had to kind of make my own path and hopefully leave a great path for those who came behind to follow. But I think the big thing was the gender discrimination, and on top of that, being a Latina, I can't say it's like double jeopardy, as we try and venture into this male-dominated career field. But I was rejected twice, and the reason was women weren't allowed in a lot of the programs that I wanted to go into. But luckily, 10 years later, and I like what Megan said about staying open to possibilities so you could see the opportunities that are out there. And so I found the right place, being in the right place at the right time. And I found that the military, which was what I really wanted to do, is to serve our country, was opening the pilot training program to women. So I think that trajectory, like Megan said, just gives you so much more experience to when you finally find that opportunity, you're ready, because you have this little toolbox, if you will, of experiences and knowledge on how to kind of take that challenge on as you work through the programs that I was in as far as pilot training. That was quite challenging. And I was married, and we had Marcia. She was 4 years old, so she experienced that as well. And she has her side of the story, but I'll stick to mine for now. But the military and in commercial aviation was quite challenging. You know, I mean, getting to American Airlines with 30 females out of a pool of 5,000 pilots was another challenge. And not even all the employees knew that they had female pilots at the time. So, you know, every time I'd get on a aircraft, the passengers would come on board and ask me for a blanket or a pillow, you know, saying, oh, and I very politely kind of educate them and say, well, let me find the flight attendant for you, and I'm sure they'll be able to help you. But, you know, once I was given that opportunity, I knew that I belonged and that I wasn't going anywhere, and giving up to me was not an option, you know. But the way I went through that is I had to find my allies, my mentors, which were all men at the time, but they were very supportive. And like you said, you don't know what you don't know. If you don't ask, how are you going to find out? And that's what I did. I asked lots of questions. I looked for my allies. I looked for my mentors. But one thing that really helped me was that I needed to see myself as I wanted others to see me, because that's so important, you know. And like Lexi said, we deserve it as much as the next person next to us. We deserve it because we got there the same way everyone else did. So I found that giving respect and expecting the same in return was key, and presenting myself like that. So, but I think that we are still being challenged, and there's still barriers because there's people that still do not want us there. But we're here to tell them we're not going anywhere, and we're here to stay and just to live with it. So I think that's
right.
where we're at.
Exactly. Well, and I also know when you're the first at anything, right, you have to excel. Like, you have to go above and beyond what, you know, anybody else perhaps in the program would be okay with performing at, right, the level. So, you know, that's a lot of pressure, right,
Mm-hmm.
being the first, because it does mean how does that pathway develop for those behind you. So, you know, our performance has to be stellar. It has to be above bar all the time, right? And it should always be that way, but in comparison to most, sometimes we're rated quite differently, right? Any opportunity to find a ding, right? So I know you have a lot of stories around that.
I do, and just to add to that comment is that one thing that was important to me, I did not ask for any extra exemptions or help, because I wanted to work as hard as the next person next to me and show that I had what it took to make it through and get through the program. So just because I was a female, I did not want that special help, if you will, as far as being allowed to do something less. So I put in 100+%, you know, in the program.
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Morgan, I think this next question is perfectly lined up for you, obviously being in the space that you're in. There's been a major uptick in tools and AI technology that claim to remove the bias out of hiring. So this ties into what, Lexi and I were kind of discussing, that it's all about how we're hiring at the upfront, but, what are we doing once they get in? But let's stick to the upfront piece, right? What are your thoughts on these technologies that are coming out that are claiming to remove the bias from the initial hiring phase?
I love this question because I think it feeds into how important this group is and conversations like this are. And I'm going to go a little bit off track, but I promise it'll come back to the AI. I love the example of like safety measures in cars, right? So when seatbelts and airbags became standard in vehicles, great idea, right? Everybody wants a vehicle to be more safe. It's a no-brainer. No need to argue about that. But what they found out in doing studies years later is that women were still getting more severely injured in car accidents, even though men were more likely to be in car accidents. And the underlying cause of that turned out to be that crash test dummies were modeled after the average adult male from a size and weight perspective. And so, yeah, seatbelts are great and airbags are great, but if the people in the room that are building these tools aren't taking into consideration any experiences outside of their own, then it's not going to serve everyone. You're still going to have the same issues you had without these tools. And I think that the same applies to AI tools in hiring. I think it's an incredible idea. Of course, we want to be able to remove, especially a lot of the unconscious bias that happens during the hiring process for any job. But AI has to be trained. It's not magic. It doesn't just flip on. And the data it has to be trained with, and the people who are training it are still bringing bias into that process. So because we have an inherently inequitable hiring society right now, feeding historical data into these AI models is creating the same bias that exists currently. So that's why I think it's so important to have diverse backgrounds, diverse people in these roles that are part of developing that AI, training that AI, people who can point those things out before it gets to the point of being a live product. And then we see the downfalls and the pitfalls afterwards. I think we've all probably read there are a lot of cities and states that have actually banned AI in making hiring decisions for that reason. I do think that it's the direction that the future is going to go. And I think it's an important one because it's impossible to ever remove unconscious bias from humans. And I think if we can get the technology to a place where it can help support that, that's great. That's an incredible step in helping us meet hiring goals. But we need more women, more diverse women, and more people with diverse backgrounds in those roles developing that technology to ensure that it's going to best serve the entire community.
100%. Especially, I know a lot of times the AI technology has been banned because it's not being unbiased to those with special needs, right? So we need all kinds of walks of life being at the front end. So would you say there's hope? It's just we're in the early stages of developing this and making sure that all the right people are still in the room at the front end?
It's exactly that. We have to have the right people in the room, the right people asking the right questions, the right people who have lived those experiences and know and can see where that's going to go wrong from the front end. But yes, I definitely think there's hope. It's all just about training, right? So the better data we can get in there to train the models, the better people we can get in there. I definitely think that there's room for AI in hiring tech.
Absolutely.
Can I comment to that real quick? As far as the hiring practices, yes, it's important that the people who have experienced it have a voice, so you can kind of interpret the need to develop that AI. But I think another important key is to have women in leadership positions in order to make that happen, because a lot of women still have a lot of feelings to shatter, and it's hard getting up there. But once you're there, staying there is another challenge. So I think we need to have more women and minorities in leadership positions in order to influence and change the conversation to where it needs to go. So I think that's also part of the key in developing that type of software.
100%. There's data out there that's showing, there has been conventional wisdom or data saying that a lot of times that women fall off at that middle career stage leadership because of family.
Mhm.
And actually more and more data that's coming out is showing that some of the biggest reasons that they're leaving is because they're not given those opportunities, right? They're not seeing themselves at the table. They're seeing, maybe there's a seat or two. So there's a frustration that essentially sets in. So they go and seek alternative opportunities, or they just settle for where they're at, right? Because sometimes having to navigate, as Lexi B, I'm sure, knows very well, having to navigate those nuances, right? And navigate those conversations, a lot of times, it's a challenge, right? And it can be very frustrating. So it could be defeating at best. So it really kind of deters females from pursuing. So absolutely, I agree there needs to be more female leaders at the discussion table as it relates to anything, but definitely this type of technology. And it can't be absent of continuously educating individuals, because again, yes, we can remove or try to remove as much unconscious bias at the front end, but once they're in, what are we doing then, right? How are we continuously educating the rest of the organization to embrace and cultivate that particular talent pool for them to thrive and be successful in that organization, right? So one can't remove the other, right? It's not a Band-Aid or a fix-all. But yeah, I definitely agree, Morgan. I think it has some promise, definitely in the early stages, but still a long ways to go, for sure.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah.
I think that we need to be also more specific. We need women in the room. We need the right women in the room. We need to start having conversations within women, femme, non-binary communities with just us and talking about, because we have a few of those people in leadership, not enough, but we have a few, and we don't have enough conversation about those few actively deciding to walk in white patriarchal supremacy because of their own trauma and thinking that's how I get things done. And part of doing that is not also bringing other people like us into the room. So I'm always advocating, I need more people who look like me in rooms. I need more women in rooms in leadership. I want that to happen. I want the right one.
Right.
So if you're not, whoever you are, however you identify, whatever the intersectionalities of your fabulousness is, if you are not walking in this freedom fight of like, and I'm going to lead differently. I do not have to lead like a colonizer. I do not have to talk to you as if I own you, right? That's the people that I want to see in leadership. And if you're not going to do that, in my personal opinion, you really don't need to be there.
Right. Because then you're just following the same program, right? We need everybody to come bring their authentic self and not be afraid to bring their authentic self in their leadership style, because that is where the diversity is, right? Is in how beautiful each of us are individually, right? And being able to embrace that 100% and cultivate that.
Absolutely. And just real quick, if you have Disney Plus, I recommend the short feature animation called Pearl. If you haven't seen it, it's amazing. It talks about assimilating. Once you get to that role, once you're in the room, you tend to assimilate and become what the room looks like, and you forget who you are. So highly recommend it.
I have to go watch it. I have not heard of this.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, this next question, I think, perfectly lines up, right, with what we're talking about, as well as I think, Lexi B, you'd be best to kind of get us kicked off here, is how do you respond to leadership who says, we just hire or promote the best person for the job, regardless of race or gender?
The same way I'd respond in the 1950s to some white cop in the South that says Jim Crow laws aren't racist. We just want to separate people. That's what that sounds like. That's the 2022 definition of Jim Crow. So this is what I think. Yes, first and foremost, you should always hire the right person for the role. Okay. And I'm very, very big on that. I manage people, I hire people. I always hire what I think at the time, based on the candidate pool, the right person for the role. My issue, though, is that people do not make sure their candidate pool is diverse to make those decisions. We don't want to talk about it, but we need to, about how a lot of these diversity, a lot of these hiring pools are from our own personal network. And that's just what happens, right? Because we want to hire quickly. We want things to get done. As a manager, you want to know that the person you're hiring is going to do a really, really good job. So that's the first bias that needs to be broken. Now that we know that bias is there, why aren't we bringing more people into the room that we don't know, that we've never met, that we haven't seen, who may not be part of our friend group, who may not be uncle or auntie to our kids, who may not be, you know, the second cousin of the friend down the street into that room? And that is the issue. I do not think we have a pipeline problem in tech. Right. I work in an engineering department. I've been at many major tech rooms and tech companies. And I'm always like, there is no pipeline issue with Black and brown people. Black and brown people are divine. And also, more importantly, without Black and brown people using your products, it actually wouldn't mean anything. Right. Twitter would not be anything without Black Twitter. And we just need to own that. Right? TikTok would not be TikTok without Black and brown creators. And we just need to own that. And so you're telling me there's a pipeline problem, but the users who make you great and make you money don't even look like you. We don't have a pipeline problem. You've decided there's a pipeline problem. And so, yeah, that's my response to that. We really got to let this Jim Crow language go. It's old. I think people see through it. I don't think people want to say that out loud, but that is what it is. And I think that until we start just saying it with our chest and saying, like, this is what you're actually saying, and people feeling very much discomforted in that feeling and then growing from that discomfort to be better, we actually cannot make a change.
Right. I mean, and just the way our brains are wired, right? We're always looking for the shortest distance from A to B. And unfortunately, a lot of unconscious bias comes from that. So you tend to surround yourself or recruit, promote, or hire people that sound, look, and talk like you, right? Because it's you get each other. It's not challenging. You don't have to wrap your head around how are they talking, what are they saying, right? So I think the best exercise is to remove yourself from those comfort circles, right? Engage with diverse groups, right? So that way you understand and can learn from those different cultures. And also when you're interviewing, make sure that panel is diverse. Make sure that the candidates can see themselves in that job, right? If the only person they're interviewing with is a white male and they're a Hispanic female, it might cause a problem. Right? So make sure that you have multiple people interviewing, or at least someone that is representative of that individual, to demonstrate that we have representation here. We see you, we want to hear from you. So I 100% agree.
Can I add to that? Also, when you're interviewing and you have that diverse slate of candidates, make sure that you are not having that diverse slate of candidates because it looks good, even though you have already decided who your candidate is. Nowadays, a lot of companies actually have requirements to make sure you have a diversity slate, you know, very similar to the Rooney Rule in the NFL. And so for folks who don't know, in the NFL, there's a Rooney Rule that basically says if you, I don't know if y'all can hear that. If you are hiring for higher positions in the NFL and coaching and that kind of thing, you know what? I'm going to mute myself, but you get the point.
Yeah, you're fine. Yes.
Yeah.
No, we'll circle back to that. No worries. So next up, right here, Morgan. We currently live in a world where technology is everywhere, which translates to most organizations being technology companies, which we touched on earlier. How would you advise individuals from non-traditional and traditional education pathways to see this as an opportunity? So I know this kind of springs off of what we talked about before, but any more you can add to that, especially given your background and obviously being in the staffing world, you know, you see a lot of trends, right? You're kind of in the weeds with the data. How would you impart some wisdom to those here on the audience as it relates to seeking those opportunities, even if they don't come from the traditional college background?
Yeah, I think going back to not knowing what you don't know about what's out there and what's available, I think that when a lot of us hear tech for the first time, we think startups, right? You think the Twitters, the Facebooks, the Googles, the Airbnbs of the world. And those are great and amazing, and you can strive, and that can be a goal company for you to work at, or it might be somewhere you get a job right out of college. But if that doesn't work out, that does not mean that was the only path into technology for you. Like, there are so many, like you said in the question, every company is becoming a tech company. They have to. There's no option not to. I think staffing is a fun example because it was one of the slowest to change. And has really only been changing by force because there were so many disruptors that were coming up in these purely digital markets and things like Upwork and other platforms where people were really taking control of their own hiring. But any position you can get into in a company, you leverage to, one, learn things from, but two, to create your network, to grow your network, and to work your way into technology within those companies. Just because it's not a tech company does not mean there's not a tech opportunity for you there. And if that means staying with an organization where you're at, if you like the company you work with and you feel like you have good sponsors and good mentors and good people around you and leaders who are those type of leaders that you want to follow, don't think you have to leave that to get into technology. You can, if you don't see it in your company, they probably need it. So there's room to create your own path. And I know that sounds easy, or it sounds like I'm oversimplifying something that is obviously going to be a bigger challenge for women, for people of color. It's not just because you want to do it doesn't mean you can. But I also think that we get too caught up in that name brand name on a resume, that, you've got to have that big flashy startup, and otherwise you didn't succeed at what you wanted to succeed at. And that's just not true. There is opportunity everywhere to get into the field and to learn the things that you want to learn, and to then take that experience and move it somewhere else. So don't feel like because you've gotten a rejection, especially with some of these massive companies where you apply and they're getting thousands of applicants, you might not even get the automatic robot response telling you that your resume wasn't a good fit, which also, by the way, is probably being monitored by some sort of AI technology that is matching you up to a job description. It is not a marker of your self-worth or your ability or your opportunity to be able to get those roles. Just because those massive companies didn't have an opportunity for you or didn't see your value. Be a big fish in a small pond for a little bit, and then pivot it from there.
100%. Any opportunity that gives you the chance to gain experience is experience well gained. And as we move forward and we have multi-generational workplaces, the younger generations, the Gen Zs, right? Having a college background is not going to be that must-have for many organizations moving forward as those individuals move into leadership roles. So, forging your own pathway, building that experience, especially right now with the candidate scarcity, right? There's no trend line out there right now that shows that organizations or clients, I say clients, companies are going to be in the driver's seat again in hiring. Right? It's now in the candidate talent pool driver's seat, and this is the time to move, right? This is the time to get in where you can, get the experience, build yourself, learn and grow. There's a lot of opportunity out there. So 100%, you do not have to have the traditional pathway to advance your career. And I feel that that's going to be less and less the case as those generations move along. Obviously, we want doctors to be doctors, right? We want them to go to medical school. So there are going to be some that need to fall in that traditional space, because I'm sure no one here wants to get operated on someone that went to a boot camp for surgeons. So just, FYI. Perfect. Lexi, are you good to talk now? Okay.
Yeah, sorry about that.
I think you had some background music. You're good. Yeah. So there's been obviously a diversity journey where we have gone from D&I to DE&I to DEI and B to now DEIB and A, which stands for accessibility. Mm-hmm. What does accessibility mean to you?
Yes, so I just want to start this and say that I actually do not work in DEI or DEIB or DEIBA, right. but I do work in tech. I've actually never formally worked for those those teams. I've always been the person inside the business, like, yo, y'all need to do better, right?
Right.
So accessibility is very big for me because I think that we are not talking enough about accessibility and people who are part of the disabled community that can be defined in so many ways. There is this phenomenal accessibility advocate on Instagram that I highly recommend for anybody to follow her. Her name is Imani. I think it's Barbarin. Her Instagram handle is Crutches and Spice. It's fabulous. And she said, and I follow her because I think that she is such a phenomenal advocate to really not only understand accessibility, but understand how it applies to people that are not disabled. Basically, what Imani is saying is she's like, if you actually put effort into making sure that your spaces and places are safe and sound for people who are disabled, you're making it better for everyone. And it goes back to that same idea of intersectionality when Kimberly Crenshaw termed that word. And the idea is that the most oppressed person in the room, if you solve their problem, you're actually solving everybody else's problem. Checking my own privilege, I am not disabled. I am a huge and fierce freedom fighter for people in the accessibility community because I think it's important that they have the tools, they are safe, seen, heard, and they are paid equitably. And what does it look like for us to build places and spaces so they can actually do their best work? When they are doing their best work, I also benefit from that, and I can do my best work as well. And so I think adding that accessibility to all of these terms, number one, way overdue, right? People in this community have been around forever, and they're fabulous and they're phenomenal, and they definitely contribute to society. And I'm so excited that we're doing it. If we actively engage with this community and solve their needs, you're actually helping everybody else. So you win too.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. That is so true. And simply stated, but obviously well overdue. 100% agree with you. So I know we're coming close to the end of time, so I'm going to wind it down a little bit. Olga, if you could speak to your younger self, what advice would you give her?
Well, I've thought about that question, and it's been asked before, but I think the best advice is for me that I would give my younger self would be to continue to be patient, continue to see the world with open eyes, and continue to ask questions and explore. So I think that would be my best advice to myself. And just because we have one bad experience doesn't mean that the next one will be just as bad, because now you have that experience under your belt and you would know how to handle it better every time. So.
100% agree. Well, we're definitely getting close to the end of our time together. Want everybody to answer this question. Morgan, would love for you to kick it off. If there's one thing you would like the audience that's here with us today and anybody that's watching this after it's been recorded, what is a takeaway that you would like to impart on them from this session? What would that be?
Always ask questions. I feel like a lot of times, especially with women, that we feel like we either didn't deserve to be in the room for a conversation or in the meetings that we're in, or that we were lucky to get included and we don't want to rock the boat, or we don't want to come off like we don't know something. And so we fake it till you make it. Fake it till you make it is great for confidence. Don't try to fake it till you make it with your knowledge and your experience. Like, ask. What I spent way too many years leaving a meeting and not having a clear understanding of what the decision that had been made was, or what the next steps were, because I didn't want to admit that I didn't know something that was being discussed. And that will only ever hurt you. It will never help you. You will be found out for not knowing something that you had claimed to have known in a meeting. It is always better to ask those questions. And what I learned is the smartest person in the room is usually the one that is asking all of those questions. That's the person who knows that they are never know everything, that there is always room for them to grow and to learn more, and that there are other people who have different expertise than they do. And soak that up. Learn as much as you can from people. It is never a stupid question. Always ask. Never leave a meeting if you didn't understand and pretend like you knew what was going on. Always, always better to be honest and be true and learn.
Agree. Lexi B?
I would say the number one, that's fabulous, Morgan. I completely agree. I would say so much, but the one that I want to highlight on, you need to actively put people in your life that support you. And the people that don't, you need to lovingly and actively let them go. It is very hard out here, y'all, in these world streets. And the only way that you are going to be successful in your career is directly influenced by the friendships outside of work. It's directly influenced by the romantic relationships outside of work. And so as women, regardless of your woman journey and regardless of what you look like and the kind of food you ate when you were little or the language you speak at home, it's very important that if you want to be successful in your career, you are actively making sure the people that you surround yourself with, especially the people / person that you romantically decide to be with, supports all of the layers of you. Because there is no way that you will be able to be at your greatest self without that unwavering and militant support.
100% agree. There's an analogy that I like to use. When you hang out with painters, you're going to get paint on yourself. So make sure it's positive paint, not negative paint. So your circle definitely is your influencing power and your support system. Absolutely. Mom, what would your takeaway?
Well, I'm going to add on to what Lexi said, but I'm going to leave you, the last thing is my mantra and what that means to me. But Lexi, I found that relationship. We've been married for over 48 years, and there's good times and bad times, and you need to work as hard in your profession as you do in your relationship, always, because the effort that you put into your career needs to equal the effort you put into your relationship, whether it be romantically, friends, your inner circle. It's just as important because life goes on. And if you lose that profession, what are you left with? You don't want to be left alone. And a lot of people say it's lonely at the top because a lot of people forget that. So my mantra is querer es poder, and that's in Spanish. And I translate it. And I think this can apply to everyone. Where there's a will, there's power. And we all have that within us.
Perfect. 100% agree. Thank you so much. This has been an incredible discussion. I'm sure it will be ongoing between all of us. So I thank you from the bottom of my heart for joining this and being so impactful today. A huge thank you. Thank you to the LinkedIn community for listening with open eyes, hearts, and minds, because that's important. This concludes our event today. Have a wonderful rest of your day wherever you may be in this great, big, wonderful world. Until next time, bye.